Vivekachoodamani kevalam Atmarupe bhati Hridivishta manasa Chingvata ajjata Avana chalamuru Atmanishtu Veham Pradmani Vedakam Aham Bhaktirnatasya Yato Maham Tattva Samay Siddha Masadha Drishta Manishta Mano So Spukaya Aruna Shivaha Purna Vibha Swayam So Spukaya Aruna Shivaha Purna Vibha Namo Ramana. We have been meditating on Vivekachoodamani, the original Sanskrit work by Adi Shankara, has been translated in Tamil and then later into English by the ashram, but the Tamil translation is by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. We have been relying on the translation for our meditation on this holy work, Vivekachoodamani, the crown jewel of discrimination, which takes us directly to self-enquiry as the sole means for liberation and the identity of the Brahman with the Atman as the only mode of absolute liberation, as suggested, as pointed out, as declared by the Acharya. The oneness or Advitiya nature of the Atman and the Brahman. We backtrack a little bit into the previous segment to cover the sheath of bliss and then look at the verses on the transcendence the transcendental self, or the Brahma Swarupam, which concludes the crossing of the 5 sheets. These are verses 209 to verse 226, about 17 verses that we will try and cover. There may be a few overlaps in the versions of the Vivekachoodamani, but more or less the verse to verse matching is there in Bhagavan's translation. Let's go into the sheath of bliss as the last sheath. We had seen a little bit of it in the previous satsang, the previous session. Let's go into it a little bit. The Anandamaya Kosha is the modification of ignorance. The ignorance is the word used, and as the sadhakas who have been practicing Atma Vicharam and as devotees of Bhagavan, we can take it as the sheath of self-ignorance. That it is into that into which we go to sleep in our bound state, and from which we are carried forth into the waking state. There is a talk with a Maulvi. Usually these words of discrimination will be used by Munagalji only when relevant. When the Maulvi wants to bring out some difference between the belief systems, then only probably you will use that word. The Maulvi asks, please tell me how the deep sleep overtakes me. And Bhagavan says, the waking state also overtakes you similarly. But the Maulvi says, no, I don't know how the sleep overtakes me, but I know how I wake up. And Bhagavan just doesn't pursue the argument. He says, that is all right, and goes off to the next suggestion. But that is a relevant point for the sadhaka. What Bhagavan is saying is that the deep sleep is also a world, a state which overtakes us. But waking state is also a state that overtakes us in the sadhana period. Unbeknownst, that is unknown to us, we are pushed back into the waking state. From the Anandamaya Kosha, we are not allowed to permanently stay in the sheath of bliss. Once whatever authority decides your stay is over in that, you are pushed back into the waking state. And we can realize this by the way we wake up. You set up the alarm, but many times you wake up before the alarm goes off. And sometimes you would have observed that unknowingly you would have switched off the alarm, even in a modern touch screen. You would have touched the relevant portion and then gone back. Unknown, then wake up a little bit later. So when these two episodes happen, you can realize that even when you are waking up to the alarm, you are being allowed to wake up by a power, by the Atma Shakti beyond you, beyond the sadhana. So the Anandamaya Kosha is then clear. It is the Kosha into which we go in deep sleep and are pushed out of it. It is the sheath of ignorance. It is the modification of ignorance in which the Atma Shakti, the Supreme Self, is reflected. The points we had left out in the last discussion. So how the Anandamaya Kosha reveals itself. That it reveals itself at will in the 3 states: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. and yields the different modes of bliss from perceiving, obtaining, and experiencing things. What is this? How do we experience the Anandamaya Kosha in perceiving, obtaining, and experiencing things? Well, it is said to be in deep sleep only, but it manifests itself unannounced at its own will in the waking state, says the Acharya, as the happiness of, because it is Anandamaya Kosha, is the happiness of perceiving, happiness of obtaining, and happiness of experiencing. Bhagavan covers this in the talks. He says that the Priya, Moda, and Pramoda are the three modes in which we experience the Anandamaya Kosha in the waking state. He takes the example of we are walking in the market and our mind is in anything but the Anandamaya Kosha. It is rambling, it is going and throwing thought after thought, and we are in anything but bliss. Suddenly we see lovely mangoes, ripe ones, Bhagavan says, and that very perception brings us happiness. Then it gives way to the fear that we should obtain it, that it should be within our range of purchase and we should be able to obtain it before somebody picks those ripe ones away. So we get there and we get into the happiness of possession. We get the mangoes in hand. Then comes the disturbance. Will I be able to have it in peace if I take home? And once we experience it, there is happiness there too. But what Bhagavan says is the beautiful pointer as to how the Anandamaya Kosha is experienced there. That in each of these situations of Priya, Moda, and Pramoda, that is, observing the object of love, the having that in our possession, and then experiencing it. In each of this, the happiness comes out of the cessation of the rambling of thoughts, he says. That the happiness is not from the object. The happiness is because of some deep vasana, deep like. We are so attached to the observation of the object that all other thoughts that were rambling about the office, about the home, and about the war, all are put aside by this one thought of observing the object of love. And in each of those three modes, that is Priya, Moda, and Pramoda, Bhagavan says that the Anandamaya Kosha is experienced as the cessation of thoughts, as the removal of thoughts. So that is the quality of Anandamaya Kosha, isn't it? That in the Anandamaya Kosha, there are no thoughts, that it is free of all thoughts, and that is where the bliss is experienced. So that is how the experience of Anandamaya Kosha in the waking state is there. Later on, the Acharya will say that happens according to the previous punya, as well as according to the modification of the Prakriti. The Prakriti herself has modified as the Anandamaya Kosha, and she allows herself to be felt as the happiness of cessation of other thoughts, says he. But then how is this experienced in deep sleep? We have seen in waking, we can extend it to dream also. In dream, when we are focused on the objects of love, then we seem to experience happiness in the dream also. Still, we can say it is from the Anandamaya Kosha. Now, in deep sleep, the Acharya points out that all of us experience, whether sadhaka or one who has practiced discrimination and has a pure mind, both of them experience happiness in the deep sleep. But the experience of happiness of the one who has not yet completely purified the mind or the ego, it is somewhat, the bliss is somewhat experienced in deep sleep, whereas the ones who have eliminated the sheaths, they experience the Anandamaya Kosha effortlessly at all times and in all its fullness in deep sleep. At all times, they experience it effortlessly. Only the I is experienced. So they operate out of the Anandamaya Kosha, or in fact, they are the source of Ananda to this waking dimension. The very presence of the sage brings happiness, brings peace, and in that presence of the Anandamaya, only the power is there, where the doubts of those who are around, those doubts are completely brought to cessation in the power that is exhibited by that silence. But the sage, the one who has eliminated the five koshas, the Acharya says, effortlessly experiences the Anandamaya kosha all the time, and the Anandamaya kosha is experienced in all its fullness, not somewhat in deep sleep. That is why the Acharya says, Nidra Samadhi Sthiti. To the egoless one, the deep sleep state is Nirvikalpa Samadhi, is what the Acharya states. Not in this work, in some other work. Now, can this bliss sheath into which we go in deep sleep, can it be taken as the real Ananda of the self? No. This is also to be eliminated. This Ananda is also to be eliminated. There should not be any desire to sleep endlessly. Whenever the thought of deep sleep comes in the waking, one has to inquire, for whom is this thought about sleep? And understand that 8 hours or 4 hours or 3 hours of deep sleep is present throughout the waking state as self-ignorance. That the real Anandamaya Kosha is self-ignorance. That is how we defined Anandamaya Kosha. You remember that it is the ignorance of the Atma Swarupa. And that ignorance of the Atma Swarupa is a continuing sleep that is present all through the waking state. And only in the presence of the ignorance of the self do we get into dream, that is thoughts, or do we get into the waking state, that is the sensory world. Therefore, the Anandamaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya and Manomaya and Pranamaya Kosha, which form the subtle body, as well as the Annamaya Kosha, are experienceable here and now in our inward journey. For the ones who want to drop the sheets, all the three are present, not linearly in time like this, but present here and now for one to turn inward and transcend. That's what we are going to see next. That, however, this Anandamaya Kosha is not final. It is also a sheath to be transcended because it is having temporary nature. You are pushed out of it, and it is having qualities. Only if those qualities are there, then the Anandamaya Kosha is determined. It has to be thought-free. It is not the state of the sage who is in Sahajanishta. In Sahajanishta, the Atma Anubhava is natural, so that even when the body is speaking, even when the mind is knowing, the Sahajanishta is not disturbed. Therefore, the Anandamaya Kosha, in which the bliss is experienced sporadically and which is characterized by the absence of thoughts, cannot be the real self. It cannot be the state of the Sahajanishta, which is not disturbed even when the body is active or the mind is engaging in some thoughts. The Nishta, the identity with the Brahman, has become natural to such a one. Now we come to the transcendental self, having crossed the bliss sheath, which is about 3 verses in the original work. That is what we have covered. Now coming to the transcendental self, how the 5 koshas are to be deleted. When you remove the false ideas, if by the rejection of the false ideas, all the 5 sheaths are eliminated, the self alone is experienced as the I. From here on, for a few verses, you can take that the Acharya is instructing a disciple. The disciple will respond and the Acharya will reply again. The disciple will ask a question and will get a response from Acharya. Now, that's what we are going to see in dealing with the transcendental self. That is how the 5 koshas are removed. So, how the 5 koshas are removed? They are removed by removing or rejecting all the false ideas. So, the sadhana of Atma Vichara is broad, though not clearly enunciated. So, in one of our satsangs, I had a friend who was reading the biographies of the great ones from the Sringeri Parampara, Acharya Parampara, Chandrasekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal and Abhinava Vidyartirtha Mahaswamigal. Their exchange, when the Abhinava Vidyartirtha Mahaswamigal was student at that time, their exchange he had brought in their biographical account and we were reading that. And in that exchange, they were discussing as to how the five koshas are removed and the self is to be experienced. The way to hold that is in the waking state, you have to take that the body is standing and you are able to see the many waves of the ocean. All those sensory objects you see are the many waves of the ocean, but you have to hold the self-attention as though the wave is attending to the ocean within. The waves are lined up like this. The guru is teaching the disciple that when you are standing, when the body is standing up, the sensory objects are perceived in the waking state. You take it that they are all waves perceived by you. You are also a wave. But your attention should be not to think of the other objects seen, but to think only of the I, of the Atma Chintana. It is called practice of Atma Chintana Upasana, the worship of the self-attention or worship through self-attention. The example given was that you are the wave, you are facing other waves, but instead of thinking of the other waves, only hold the I. That means where is the sadhana? The sadhana is in rejecting the false ideas. That there are many waves is a false idea because what is the Ullipurul is actually the ocean. The waves are not really apart from the ocean. So they are the false ideas. So what is the sadhana? To remove the attachment or identity with the Annamaya Kosha, look at the sensory objects as waves, but understand they are all false waves. They are all false ideas. The only reality is of the ocean within, which is self-attention. Similarly, in sitting, you are coming to the dream state because you can look at the mind, says the Acharya Chandrasekhara Bharati Swamigal, says while sitting, think of yourself as a bead, one of the beads in a rosary of beads strung together by a thread. Similar to the wave situation, don't think of other thoughts, don't think of other beads, but only turn inward and hold the thread that is passing through you. That means when other thoughts come, we should understand that they are beads appearing before us. We have to ask for whom is this other bead? It will come as for me. In who am I? The I thought being held. That is, we are perceiving the thread that is passing through us. And before lying down, before going to bed, the Mahaswamigal says, take that you are a wave now merging into the ocean of bliss. Get rid of all the false ideas. Get rid of all the non-self thoughts. All the koshas will appear as the non-self. All the 5 koshas will appear as the non-self thoughts. Drop those false ideas and be ready for the ocean to engulf you. That means what? The sadhana to drop the 5 sheets is to drop the false ideas. Then the Acharya says, once the 5 koshas are eliminated, by dropping the false ideas and holding the Atma Chintana, then the I will rise and shine, says the Acharya. That when the 5 sheets are eliminated, the self alone is experienced as I. It alone remains whole and self-aware, distinct from the 5 sheets. The witness of the 3 states. The self is described here as the witness of the 3 states. Self-effulgent, immutable. Immutable means that which can change form. Immutable is the opposite of that. Untainted, everlasting bliss. It is like someone who neither is the pot nor partakes of the nature of the pot, but now has identified with the witness. He begins the journey as Devadatta, says Acharya, but now he is no more identified with the body as Devadatta, nor as the mental identity, the thought identity as Devadatta. He is aware only as the I. The pot has been dropped, the water has been dropped, only the sun has been directly identified with. The self is not the 5 sheets which are the objects, nor does it partake in the nature of the objects, but is a mere witness of them, says the Guru. The Guru says, now you have eliminated the 5 sheets, you are now the witness. But then the disciple, very honest and very frank, brings out a bombshell. He says that to this the disciple replies, "Oh Master, after rejecting the 5 sheets as unreal, I find nothing remaining except the void. So what is there to be known as I, as the truth of the self?" The Shishya finds that he has come to a point where he has reached the void. He has nothing in his hands. And he is not experiencing any I, but he is being very honest with his experience. Whatever you have said, dropping the false thoughts, I have done by asking for whom is this. But then now I am coming to a void. This is an interesting place. And this is the only place up to which the ego can go. There is something about this void which is interesting. That void or shunya or the zero, which we find inside ourselves, is the place where none of the sheets can enter. That means none of the sheets have even originated when you enter that void. That means you have entered a place where none of the 5 sheets have even begun. And when you complete the experience of holding that void, you will find that it is also the same place where all the 5 sheets come and have their end. All the 5 sheets, the 3 states, the 3 bodies, all of them are their non-origination in the zero, in the void. And when the experience of the I is complete, you will find that, that it is the same place where all those entities, the 5 sheets, the 3 bodies, the 3 states, they have their end. So the zero has something very significant because it is said to contain everything. The Shishya has come up to that point, but he has not been enveloped by the aham taya spurati hrutsvayam paramapurnasat. The paramapurnasat has not come and engulfed him. He has done what has been asked in verses 18, 19 and 20 of Upadesha Sara. That is, Vrtayastvaham vrtimashritaha vrtayo mano vidyaham manaha ahamayam kuto bhavati iti chinvataha ayipatatyaham nija vicharan. He has done up to that, but ayipatatyaham has not yet happened. He feels he is still the ego who is facing the blank. He is still a perceiver, perceiving the blank. What am I to do? Says the Shishya. And the Acharya, confounding us all, says, you are an honest and an excellent student, he says. That, O learned one, you are skillful in discrimination and have spoken the truth. The Acharya was expecting just this from the student, that he will do his part, that he will still be a perceiver, but he has come to the void, he has come to the Shunya. In Devikalotram, it is called as Jnana of the Shunya, or Shunya Jnana, or Shunya Sampatta. The knowledge of the Shunya, the knowledge of the zero, the knowledge of the nothing, which will be made everything by the Ishvara, by the self, the Atma Shakti. It will be made everything, provided you wait there and you understand the Acharya. That is what the Acharya is going to reveal now. So whenever we come to that blank, which experience is shared by Major A.W. Chadwick also with Bhagwan, that he goes to that blank and he gets a fear. This is exactly the same state mentioned in Vivekachoodamani. In each of our experience, it will come. Those who are practicing Atma Vichara will meet it practically in every practice. That they will come to the blank state where they are able to see the blank. There are no thoughts. And Chadwick experiences a fear. He reports to Bhagavan, whenever I go to that blank, there is a fear. What is going to happen? And Bhagavan says that is due to lack of parichaya. You have not yet got introduced and been in touch with that state. Revisit that again and again, and you will understand it better. That is what Bhagavan says to A.W. Chadwick. But let's see how the Acharya unravels this problem. That the Shishya has followed whatever has been asked. He has eliminated the unwanted thoughts. So all the koshas have been, now he is not touching. Therefore, his eye is still a perceiver. He is seeing the shunya, he is seeing the nothingness. He has practically become nothing. And he doesn't feel that he has completed the task. There is no I anywhere in proximity. So what am I to do? See how beautifully the Acharya replies. If he says that you have come to the right point, you are skillful in discrimination and you have spoken the truth. Then he gives a rule of the enquiry. In this enquiry, what happens is that a rule of enquiry of perception is that which is perceived by something else has the latter for its witness. That means, suppose you are perceiving a blank, then that blank is not the final self, because it is having another agent of perception. That whatever is perceived by another is by itself not Swayam Prakasha. It is, and also the one perceiving that is also not relying on its self-effulgence yet. When you are perceiving the blank, you are yourself not self-effulgent, you are still seeing something else, and that something else is an inert existence, it is not yet the self. So the Acharya says, one of the enquiry rules of perception is that whenever something else is perceived, I am seeing a blank, I am seeing a darkness, I am seeing a state where nothing is there, still the perceiver is there, the agent of perception is there, the relative drik is there. And the Acharya goes ahead. When there is no agent of perception, there can be no question of the thing having been perceived at all. So when does the ego end? When does the relative self end? The relative self ends only when there is no scene. I am seeing a blank. I am now thought-free. Is still the agent of perception. Still the ego modification in the intellect, the intellectual kosha has not been transcended. We are still the intellect. In the intellect, we are the ego. As per the Acharya's definition, in Bhagavan, the I itself is separate. The origination of the I itself is the beginning of all the problems. But we are not going there yet. We are still with the Acharya's approach to this. That when there is an agent of perception, then that which is perceived is also relative drishya, that the perceiver is also a relative drik. He has not yet become the absolute drik. Then the Acharya introduces something which Bhagavan also introduces in the talks. Accordingly, the self as awareness cognizes not only itself, but also the existence of the ego with its various modifications of transient names and forms and their nascent. That means there are two modes of the self. One is it first has to necessarily know itself. Then by ajnana, it also acts as the ego, which is interested in the blank or the names and forms. So when the names and forms on the sheets are perceived, the ego is perceiving the names and forms itself. When we have come to the blank, we have come to the nascience or the ignorance of the names and forms, but still the ego is there. And in the talks, Bhagavan says, see, the ego seem to have these two modes. That is, you know yourself and you know the other. Which is a priori, he asks. Which has to be before, which has to come before which, he asks. Is the self-knowing self a priori or the other knowing self a priori? Which comes before? Which has to be as the adhara? Without any kind of hesitation, the answer in the talks is, it has to be that there is the self-knowing state which I have quickly forgotten and gone into the other knowing comfort. That is, the rigor of self-attention is not maintained. It is lost in favor of the comfort of other knowing. Bank balance is there, insurance is there, that is there, this is there, go off into liar. Whereas the reality is waiting for us to experience and be rid of all these false supports. The reality is present as the self-luminous self. That is what Acharya is saying. Accordingly, the self as awareness cognizes not only itself, but also the existence of the ego and its various modifications of the transient names and forms and their nascience. Therefore, it is the self which is their witness. It is the witness of Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti. The self is the witness of Jagrat, Swapna and Sushupti. See the beauty of Bhagavan's teachings. For a moment, let us digress. The Acharya as well as the great teachers of the Atmachintana Upasana, they have taken the support of waking, dream and deep sleep to take us to Atmachintana. That is, even these three states are thoughts and they are false thoughts. They have to be dropped. They are seen only by a non-self-attentive self. Therefore, they themselves are false. Therefore, the self-luminous self is a witness in which the three states pass by. The waking state passes, the dream state passes, the deep sleep state passes. The self is an unaffected witness. But see Bhagavan's definition of this. This is Turiya. The Turiya in the Mandukya Upanishad is the self that remains as a witness, unaffected witness, in which the three states pass. In the Karika, of course, the Turiya Tita is there, where the Turiya stands alone, untouched by the three states. It is the Turiya Tita. But Bhagavan takes the Turiya Tita only. He says that Nanudiyad Ullanilai, Namaduai Ullanilai. That the definition, I think it is in verse 27 of Ulladu Narpadu, where the sadhana verses start. Bhagavan says, Nanudiyad Ullanilai, Namaduai Ullanilai. The Tattvamasi or the Turiya Avastha is given a new look without reference to any of the bondage states. If you move as the relative self, you are bound. When you go back to your self-luminous nature, you are free. No reference to Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Now, that is the purity of Bhagavan's teachings. Now, and when you practice that, when you practice self-enquiry, this you will find that you will get the blessing of the acharyas who teach Atma Chintana, who teach Atma Vidya, the Atma Vidya Upasana. They will appear and they will teach you at the right time. When you come to that level of maturity in following Bhagavan's teachings, those acharyas will apply and they will come in the right form, in whatever form required, They will teach you. This is the Upasana we have taught with reference to the three states. Because that Atma Shakti is the Ishvara Shakti. It is the only Upasana Swarupa which comes to us in various forms. As Akka had quoted in our this one, that Vida Vida Uruvai. The same Satchit is appearing in various forms of practice, in different forms, so that we are able to do Upasana and slowly come to the Satchit. So all the names and forms in which we do the Upasana are only the Satchit appearing in that form, so that we will be brought to the Satchitananda, is the teaching of Bhagavan in Ashtakam. Now, coming back to the Jagrat Swapna Sushupti Sakshi and Bhagavan's teaching of Nanudya Dulanile, just think, let the beauty of the purity of the teaching sink in. Just practice the Bhagavan's Nanudya Dulanile. You will get the greatness of the Atma Vidya teaching of the great ones. You will come to that point. Then only you will be able to abide in the transcendental self. The Upasana will come and you will understand its greatness, and you will understand why the Atma is said to be the witness of Jagrat Swapna Sushupti and the beauty of Bhagavan's purity. What a great pure being has appeared to teach us all, to open up the path of Tanmaya Nishta to everyone. It has been opened up, that which was taught only to the most eligible of students in a Guru Sishya Parampara, just by the Avatara Mahima of Bhagavan, has been opened up to the denizens. We can say in one sense that great goodness has come because of the Kali Yuga also, that because the intellect has become so refined that it can claim that it is thought-free, that it can claim it is surrendered. And as Ganapati Muni says, it can mistake intellectual knowledge for actual realization. That is where Bhagavan's Avatara Mahima becomes clear to us, that he doesn't even need the reference as the Atma is the Sakshi of Jagrat Swapna Sushupti states. But of course, the Acharya takes us through that it is the single immutable in self in the waking, dream and sleep states. It makes itself known as the being consciousness bliss. It is self-luminous. It makes known to itself by its own self-effulgence. To know the self, you don't need a light apart. And whenever you are seeing something apart, even a blank, that means neither the other seeing self nor the blank are the realization. There is still an agent of perception and there is another perceived. So whenever there is another perceived, there is a relative perceiver there. And the self has not been realized. There is sadhana to be done. For whom is this blank? We have to ask, says Bhagavan, says the Acharya also. Through your keen intellect, know this eternal blissful awareness of the self to be the I. The fool takes the reflection of the sun in the water of a pot to be the sun. The wise man eliminates the pot, eliminates the water and the reflection, and knows the sun in the sky as it really is, single, unaffected, but illuminating all three. What are the three? The pot, the water, and the reflection. The pot is the body, the water is the mind, the reflection referred to is the I thought. We take the I thought itself to be the self. Whereas the actual self is the Surya. You don't need the pot, you don't need the water, you don't need the I. Only inquire into the truth of the I. You will directly perceive the self when it reveals itself. The fool takes the reflection of the sun in the water of a pot to be the sun. The wise man eliminates the pot, eliminates the water, eliminates the reflection, and knows the sun directly in the sky as it really is, single, unaffected, and illuminating all these three. In the same way, the fool through error and misperception identifies himself with the ego and its reflected light experienced through the medium of intellect. The wise and discriminating man eliminates body, intellect, and the reflected light of consciousness and probes deeply into his real self, which illuminates all the three, while remaining alone in the ether of the heart. The self is not affected by any of this. That is why Bhagavan says, even when his body was speaking, the Nishtha had not gone anywhere. The Nishtha was shining like the Shruti note in a musical piece. In a musical piece having many notes, the Shruti goes as the Adhara, as the support that is constantly present. Similarly, in the Jnani, the Atma Jnana is not lost even when the body is active. The wise and discriminating man eliminates the body, intellect, and reflected light of consciousness while remaining alone in the ether of the heart. Thereby, he realizes the eternal witness, which is absolute knowledge illuminating all. It is subtle and all pervasive, neither being nor non being, neither inside nor outside. It is self effulgent. This, you can't call it existent, you can't call it non existent. You can't call it chit, you can't call it achit. You can't call it inside, you can't call it outside, because you don't have any tongue to call. In the self-luminous self, there is nothing else. There is not a single other thought. So you can't call anything, anything. You can't say, no, this is inside, this is outside, because there is only the self-luminous self. You can't say whether that is existence or non-existence. It is beyond existence and non-existence. It is beyond chit and jada. It is beyond ananda and dukkha. It is as it is. The self-luminous self is as it is. Still, it is called Sat Chit and Sat Chit Ananda. Realizing this, he is set free from the impurities of the ego. He has no more birth and death. The jnani who is now abiding in the self, what has he done? He has offered the Jagrat, Supna and Sushupti as food, as Naivedya to the Atma Swarupa, to the Atma Shakti. And the Atma Shakti has eaten up the Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and the one who is doing the Upasana, one who is offering them as food, he is also eaten. So all the three and the one who is eaten, they now shine as the self. The Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, and the one who offered this in Naivedya all shine only as the Supreme Self. There is only the Supreme Self. There is no Jagrat, Swapna. If you ask the Jnani how he is experiencing the Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, he'll say they have been consumed, they have been eaten up by the I. Only the I is there. There is no thought about waking state, dream, or deep sleep. The Jnani is now has no more birth or death, is free from sorrow and becomes immutable essence of the established bliss. The Jnani who through experience has realized his self to be the Brahman as it really is, as truth, knowledge, endless bliss, the single essence, eternal, boundless, pure, unattached and indivisible, not only does not return to bondage, but is that Brahman itself, the Advitiya. When will you get doubt that whether the old things will come back? Only when the Dvaita or the Triputis are allowed to creep in. When you are abiding in the self, you are absolutely the prarabdha, the return of the old ways, the old habits, completely eliminated, because there is no duality there. There is only the Advitiya Atman. There is no doubter, there is no doubt. So such a one has no return to this plane of doubt and habits. That is to say, the knowledge of identity of Brahman and self is the prime cause of release from bondage. So this is the key. This is the key teaching in one sentence. What is the release from bondage according to Acharya? The identity or Advitiya nature of oneself and the Brahma Swarupam, the Brahman. Atma and the Brahman, the immanent Atman, is the transcendental self. Hariyaditara Jivara, Ahavarisa Guhayil, Arivairami Paramatman, Arunachalarama. Parival Ulam Uruha. By the compassion of inquiry, when the whole mind has melted and you feel the Atmaswarupa inside. Paranarndidum guhayar. Arivam vili thiravai. Now, it is not only the, you will also open up the eyes of jnana. Arivam vili thiravai. Nijam arivai adu veliyam. That this is not only immanent, this is not only inside you. This Shunya, this Purna has enveloped all the lokas, all the dimensions. So the Atma Shakti does the pradakshina for you, covers up everything and comes and meets you back where you are waiting for it. You have just obeyed the Guru's teachings, you have deleted the sheets, and you are waiting in the blank. It is the Ishvara Shakti, it is the Atma Shakti that does the real sadhana. It was the support for your sadhana. Your doership regarding sadhana also will be offered to the Atma Shakti only. It will complete the pradakshina and come back and touch you as the Aham Aham Taya Spurti Swayam Paramapurna Satta. That you have just gone into the impotent blind, but waiting there, the Atma Shakti will complete the covering of everything. Come back and touch you and reveal to you that you who have waited in that blank no more exist as a separate seer. You have been consumed along with all the states, Jagarat, Swapna, Sushupti, into that Purna Swarup, Paramapurna Sat. That is to say, the knowledge of identity of the enquirer, the Atmaswarupa, with the Brahman, is the release from bondage. For him who aspires after liberation, there is no other way of release from bondage but the knowledge of identity of Brahman and Sat. So the Acharya is saying that this is the only way. And unless he says like that, we will be just waiting to dig another well, another well, another well, another well. Having taken this up, pursue it to the end. That I will not leave till this Purana reveals itself. The Guru has assured, I will wait in the blank till the Ishvara reveals himself, consuming all the states and the sadhaka. Therefore, you too, by your own experience, know yourself as always Aham Brahmasmi, Brahmaiva Aham, Brahma Aham Eva. All the three modes of expression that I am Brahman, Brahman am I, Brahman alone am I, are three ways in which this experience of I is expressed. Muruganar expresses his experience of the self towards the end of Guru Vachikakove in a segment of some verses, where his identity with the self beyond bondage and liberation, he is, without mincing words, he expresses that the sadhaka who follows the Guru, at the end of Guru Vachakka, he expresses, he himself has identified with the Atma Swarupa, Bandha Muktiti Tamparam Sukham, Vindati Iha Jivastu Daivikaha. He is revealing his divine nature of having merged in the self of all. In the last few verses before completing the work Purvachikkovel. That is what the Acharya says here. You will be experiencing the self as Aham Brahmasmi, Brahmaiva Aham, or Aham Brahmam Aham Eva. The Brahman alone am I. In any of these ways you can tell, but there is no need to tell because there is no other than the Brahma Swarupam. Let's sit and practice till 8 o'clock. Then we can listen to Akka. Pravitima, you can set the time till 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to the self, prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of the self, manifest as Ramana, we have been meditating on the Vivekachoodamani, especially as it is translated by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. And the essence of this teaching has been brought home to us by Nandakumarji, highlighting the aspects of Bhagavan's teachings which take us to the absolute freedom, or what can you call it, absolute fullness of the self. Which Nandakumarji said, in which there is no need for any support from any other relative experience of Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti. Well, it is defined as being beyond the Sakshi, even the need for a relative reference point is done away with. And one's mind is taken to the verse in Ashtakam where Bhagavan says that at the culmination of inquiry, he says, if there is no I thought, there is no need for inquiry at all right in the beginning. See, what is called ignorance of the self is by Bhagavan given a root form, a single root form as the I thought. So Bhagavan says, in Raham yenum ninevenil pira ondrum ilai. So nothing else is there. But if the I thought arises, ஆர்க்கு எற்கு என் ரகம் உதித்தலம் எதுவென உள்நாழ்ந்து உளத்தவிசுரினொரு ஒரு உளத்தவிசுரு ஒரு கொடை நிழற்கோவே. When you inquire within, for whom, ark, yerk, from where does this arise? This I thought, this ignorance of the self, what is its root? Then, and when you thus inquiring get back to the source, you become that one Chakravarti, the universal emperor, Oru Kodai Niratove. And then that, what he defines, that we came across that definition as part of the exposition, as the culminating part of the exposition, where Bhagavan says, in Raham Puram, Iru Vinay, Iral Janmam, Inbu, Tunbu. Nothing is there, none of the relative experiences are there. And we also find a similar verse in Upadesha Saram, Jnanavarchita Ajnanahina Jnanamastikim Jnatumantaram. So it's beyond all the relative experiences. So Nandakumarji keeps exhorting us to get back to that, to hold on to that essence through self-enquiry. In the earlier part of today's journey into the self, we also crossed the void. We crossed the void and we crossed the Sakshi and we came to the point of absolute abidance in the self. So these are all the landmarks in many journeys, many spiritual journeys, which are covered over here. There is this fear of void. The actual fear was experienced by Chadwick, as Nandakumarji pointed out, when he faced it. Faced that point where of cessation of all thoughts, which Nandakumarji today explained as the crossing over of all the koshas. The having crossed all the koshas, one arrives at the point of emptiness. Now, this point of emptiness had caused fear for Chadwick. It can cause fear for some people, but it could also be take one to a relative